A lot of people who love mushrooms have a slight disdain for white button mushrooms because they're not exotic and they're not exciting and they don't seem to have the great flavor that chanterelles or porcinis or morels have. And it's true that white button mushrooms aren't the same as those types of mushrooms, but you can still get a lot of great mushroom flavor out of white button mushrooms if you just know how to cook them right. And it's really a matter of having a hot pan and letting them brown and letting that moisture cook away as quickly as possible and concentrate that mushroom flavor. And you'll end up having great tasting button mushrooms, and it'll be a lot less expensive than spending a lot of money on really expensive wild mushrooms. I'll show you how to do it. First, you gotta get your pan smoking hot. And I guess maybe I'm exaggerating a little. It shouldn't be smoking crazy hot because you don't want to burn them, but you do want to use a hot pan when you're cooking mushrooms. And often, if you're doing a recipe that calls for onions or garlic, the recipe will tell you to start the onions first and then add the mushrooms. And I'm telling you right now, start the mushrooms first. Get the mushrooms cooking immediately and get that browning on them and then add your onions, because unless you're really caramelizing the onions first, the moisture in the onions is going to prevent those mushrooms from browning properly, and you won't get the same flavor and depth that you would otherwise. So start your pan heating. It's not quite hot enough yet. When it gets so that you can really only hold your hand above it for about a second, maybe even less than a second, then it's about hot enough, and then you're going to add just a couple tablespoons of olive oil. And another myth about mushrooms is while they do soak up a lot of oil and a lot of whatever else is in the pan, if you have the pan hot enough, they aren't going to just drink in all that oil. You don't need half a cup of oil to saute mushrooms. You just need to have the pan hot enough. Alright, once your pan's pretty hot, pour in about a tablespoon or two, probably 2 tablespoons of oil. And I'm not using a non-stick, so I'm going to just swirl it really quickly to make sure that I've got it covered. And then I'm throwing in, this is about ½ a pound of sliced button mushrooms. And you really want to hear the sizzle the second they get in there. And spread them out. And then leave them alone. Don't start stirring them around too much. You really want to let it get some browning before you start moving them. And I will add a little bit of salt partway through, because when the pan starts to really dry out and the mushrooms start browning, I want to get the rest of that moisture out of them as quickly as possible. So I'm going to salt them in just about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. Okay, once the mushrooms have started to get a golden brown on one side, I can sort of start flipping them over, and you can see they're really starting to release their moisture. They're almost getting soupy. These have a lot of moisture in them, but this is when I add a little bit of salt in order to sort of help that moisture get out as quickly as possible. The salt will sort of help suck it out of the mushrooms. And you just want to keep it up on a high heat, and you're going to want to let that pan almost dry out, which is probably going to take a couple more minutes. And you can see too that the mushrooms are shrinking significantly in size because they've got a lot of water in them. And when you cook that water away, and you'll concentrate that mushroom flavor. Now that my mushrooms are nice and golden, almost a caramel color, and I've seasoned them with a little bit of dry thyme and black pepper, I'm just going to deglaze the pan really quickly with some sherry vinegar. You got a lot of browning at the bottom of the pan. It's got some good flavor, and I'm just going to use these as they are. So, you know, if you were using sauteing mushrooms for a recipe, you wouldn't do this, but I'm just going to eat them. So I'm going to try it with a little bit of vinegar. The vinegar gets all the brown bits up off the bottom of the pan, adds a little brightness to this, and the sherry vinegar just makes it extra delicious with mushrooms. These mushrooms would be great folded into a stuffing for Thanksgiving or as a side to pork or beef.